My name is Clark, and at 32, I thought I had finally escaped the shadow of my golden boy brother. Growing up, I watched my parents mortgage our family home to save his failing business, while my own struggles were treated as background noise. When I found success, despite their neglect, I hoped the past was behind us. Then came my wedding to Emily, and suddenly my parents wanted to control every detail of the first achievement they couldn't claim credit for. What they never expected was that after years of silent compliance, I would finally find my voice. The silence that followed changed everything. Before I get into the full story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to family who tried to hijack your life. Growing up in suburban Portland wasn't terrible on the surface. We lived in a modest 2-story house with a basketball hoop in the driveway that my brother Marcus used constantly. My father, Thomas, was the high school football coach everyone in town respected. My mother, Diane, taught 3rd grade at the elementary school. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. But inside our home, the family dynamics told a different story. Marcus was 4 years older than me and embodied everything my father valued: athletic, competitive, and socially confident. From the time Marcus could walk, my father had him throwing balls, running drills, and learning plays. Their bond was built on shared dreams of athletic glory. I can still picture them in the backyard, my father's face glowing with pride as Marcus perfected his spiral throw. I was different from the start. While Marcus gravitated toward anything with a ball, I was drawn to how things worked. I took apart my first computer at 7, fascinated by the components inside. When I showed my father what I had discovered, he ruffled my hair and said, "That's nice, but don't break anything expensive. Now come watch your brothers practice." My mother wasn't much different. When I coded my first simple program at 9, she called it cute, but wondered why I spent so much time just playing games instead of making real friends like Marcus. One memory stands out clearly. When I was 10, I spent months building a computer program that simulated ecosystem changes for the science fair. I stayed up late perfecting it, confident this would finally be something my parents would recognize as special. The night of the science fair, I stood alone beside my display, repeatedly checking the door. My teacher eventually came by and awkwardly mentioned that I had won first place. My parents never showed. They were at Marcus's regional football game. When I got home, still clutching my blue ribbon, my mother said, "Oh, honey, we're sorry we missed it, but you know how important tonight's game was for your brother's recruitment." Throughout elementary and middle school, I maintained a perfect 4 gigapascals. I won coding competitions and even developed a simple app that tracked the school bus locations, which the district actually implemented. These achievements were acknowledged with distracted nods and quick good jobs before conversations shifted back to Marcus's latest athletic accomplishments. Christmas mornings told the same story. Marcus would unwrap expensive sports equipment, training gear, and the latest athletic shoes. I would receive practical items like socks, generic clothes, or occasionally a basic computer accessory if I had explicitly asked for it. One Christmas, when I was 12, Marcus received a complete set of professional football gear and private training sessions. I got a science book I had already checked out twice from the library. Desperate for their approval, I tried joining the school basketball team in 7th grade. I practiced constantly but lacked the natural coordination my brother had. During my first game, I missed 3 easy shots and turned over the ball twice. From the stands, I could see my father's grimace. After that game, he never attended another. I quit the team a month later after spraining my ankle and receiving only annoyed sighs from my parents about the inconvenience of doctor's appointments. Marcus wasn't cruel, but he absorbed our parents' attitudes. He called me computer geek and casually dismissed my interests. When his friends came over, they would sometimes delete my saved work as a prank. When I complained, my mother would say, "Boys will be boys, Clark. Don't be so sensitive." By high school, I had accepted my place. I found community in the computer club and advanced math classes where my abilities were valued. I had a small group of friends who shared my interests, and we created our own support system. When college application season arrived, the contrast became even clearer. My parents hired a consultant for Marcus, drove him to 6 campus visits, and spent hours helping him craft his athletic recruitment videos. Meanwhile, I researched schools alone in my room, comparing computer science programs and scholarship opportunities. "You're smart enough to figure it out," my father said when I asked for help with application fees. Besides, Marcus needs more guidance with his essays. I applied to 12 schools in secret, writing essays late at night and requesting fee waivers directly from the universities. When acceptance letters arrived, my parents seemed surprised I had applied to such competitive schools. I received a substantial scholarship to a respected computer science program in California, which my mother acknowledged with, "Well, that's convenient, since we've allocated our college fund for Marcus's expenses." The night before leaving for college, I sat alone on our front porch, 18 years old, and finally facing the truth I had suspected for years. No matter what I achieved, it would never change my place in our family hierarchy. I was the afterthought, the extra child who existed in the margins of the story my parents were writing about their athletic son. That night, I made a promise to myself that I would build a life based on my own values, not the approval I would never receive. 6 years passed quickly. At 24, I had graduated and secured an entry-level position at a tech company in Portland. The salary wasn't impressive, but it covered my small apartment rent and student loan payments. I had stayed in Portland partly out of practicality and partly out of some lingering hope that proximity might somehow improve my relationship with my parents. Marcus, now 28, had graduated with a business degree after 5.5 years and numerous changed majors. His football career had ended with a knee injury during his sophomore year, which led to a lengthy identity crisis. After bouncing between jobs for 2 years, he announced he was starting a high-end sports equipment company targeting elite high school athletes, a market he understood from our father's connections. I received a text from my mother one Sunday. "Family dinner tonight. Important news to discuss. 6 p.m. sharp." The familiar dynamics reasserted themselves the moment I arrived. My mother fussed over Marcus, asking if he was eating enough while barely acknowledging my entrance. My father and brother were deep in conversation about local coaches they could approach for product endorsements. Over my mother's lasagna, they dropped the bombshell. "We've decided to help Marcus expand his business," my father announced, chest puffed with pride. "We're mortgaging the house to provide the capital he needs." I nearly choked on my water. "What? The entire house? How much are we talking about?" "The bank approved us for $300,000, my mother said casually, as if discussing a minor home renovation. "It's an investment in the family's future." The conversation that followed revealed they had already refinanced once before, providing Marcus with $175,000 to start the business just 18 months prior. This new mortgage would bring their total investment to $475,000, nearly their entire retirement savings and home equity. Marcus lounged in his chair, spinning pasta on his fork. "The initial capital got us started, but we need to scale now. The prototypes are ready, but manufacturing requires serious investment. Have you considered outside investors?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Why would we give away equity when we can keep it in the family? Marcus responded with a dismissive wave. Besides, the returns will be insane. Dad and Mom will make back double their investment within 3 years. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I pulled up the business plan Marcus had casually emailed me months ago, but which I had never opened. The projections were wildly optimistic. He was estimating market penetration rates that established brands took decades to achieve. His manufacturing costs seemed suspiciously low. And the competitive analysis ignored 3 major players who had recently entered the same market segment. The next morning, I called my parents and asked to meet for coffee before work. At the local cafe, I carefully laid out my concerns, showing them market research I had compiled overnight and explaining realistic financial projections based on my business analytics training. Look, I have a finance minor and work with startups at my job. These numbers don't add up. The market is saturated, and manufacturing costs are going to be at least 40% higher than Marcus is estimating. My father's face darkened. So now you're a business expert? Marcus has been working on this for 2 years. He understands athletics in a way you never will. This isn't about sports knowledge, Dad. It's about basic business fundamentals. My mother reached across the table, her expression pained. Clark, why can't you just support your brother like family should? He needs this chance to prove himself. Why are you always competing with him? I'm not competing. I'm trying to protect you. What happens if the business fails? You're in your 50s. This is your retirement security we're talking about. So you're hoping he fails? My father's voice rose enough that nearby patrons glanced our way. No. I'm trying to suggest alternatives. A smaller loan, with staged funding, based on meeting realistic milestones. Or professional business advice to strengthen the model. Maybe a structured repayment plan to protect your investment. My suggestions fell on deaf ears. The conversation ended with my mother in tears, and my father angrily tossing cash on the table before they both walked out. That evening, Marcus called me. His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. What the hell, Clark? You went behind my back to try and tank my funding? I wasn't trying to tank anything. I was suggesting reasonable precautions. You've always been jealous that Mom and Dad believe in me. You and your computer nerd job, thinking you know everything. I tried reasoning with him, explaining my genuine concerns about our parents' financial security. The conversation took an unexpected turn. You know what? I know the real reason you're worried about money, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a knowing sneer. You've got your own problems. Your little online gambling habit during college. Those credit cards you maxed out. I froze. I had struggled briefly with online poker during a particularly stressful semester. A mistake I had corrected and never shared with my family. How do you know about that? I have friends who went to your school. People talk. He paused meaningfully. I also know about that guy you dated sophomore year. Does Dad know his perfect computer son experimented with men in college? My blood went cold. I had dated a man briefly in college, still figuring out my sexuality before realizing I was primarily attracted to women. Our conservative extended family would have had a field day with this information. Are you threatening me? Just saying family matters should stay private. All of them. So, maybe keep your financial expertise to yourself and let me handle my business. Our parents are adults who can make their own decisions. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence in my apartment. My own brother had essentially blackmailed me into silence while our parents mortgaged their future. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. That night, I called Rebecca, my closest friend from college, who now worked in finance in New York. They're adults, Clark. she said after I explained the situation. Sometimes you have to let people make their own mistakes, even when it hurts to watch. You've done what you can. With a heavy heart, I stepped back, knowing I might be watching a slow-motion disaster unfold, but feeling powerless to stop it. 2 months after the mortgage conversation, I accepted a job offer in Seattle at a growing tech company. The position came with a significant salary increase and better advancement opportunities, but the distance from Portland was equally attractive. I needed space from the family dynamics that left me feeling perpetually inadequate. My new life started in a tiny studio apartment in a less desirable part of the city. The rent consumed nearly half my monthly income, but it was mine. I established a routine: work, sleep, repeat. The company expected 60-hour weeks from new hires, which suited my need to stay occupied. Most nights, I came home too exhausted to think about family disappointments. 3 months into the job, I identified an opportunity. Several colleagues complained about scheduling client meetings across different time zones. During a weekend, fueled by energy drinks and determination, I coded a simple scheduling app that integrated multiple calendars and automatically suggested optimal meeting times across global locations. When I demonstrated it at work, my team leader was impressed enough to implement it company-wide. Encouraged, I spent my evenings and weekends refining the app, adding features, and improving the user interface. I registered an LLC and began developing a commercial version that could be marketed to other businesses. The app development required better equipment than my basic laptop could handle. I needed a high-performance computer and development software that would cost approximately $5,000. Despite my hesitation, I called my parents, explaining the business opportunity and requesting a small loan that I promised to repay with interest within 6 months. "Oh, honey," my mother sighed. "We've invested everything in Marcus's business. There's just nothing extra right now. Maybe next year, when things stabilize." "It's just $5,000, I pressed. "Marcus received nearly $500,000. That's different. His business is established. Yours is just an idea. His business was just an idea when you refinanced the first time." The conversation ended predictably, with my mother promising to see what we can do, the family euphemism for no. I maxed out a credit card instead, then worked 70-hour weeks to make the minimum payments. There were nights I woke up gasping, convinced I was drowning in debt and failure. I started having anxiety attacks during my commute, pulling over to breathe into a paper bag I now kept in my glove compartment. 6 months into development, I attended a local coding meetup, hoping to network with potential collaborators. That's where I met Emily. She was demonstrating an elegant solution to a database problem that had been stumping me for weeks. Her approach was brilliantly simple, her explanation clear, without being condescending. "I'm Clark," I said, approaching her after the presentation. "Emily," she replied with a smile that reached her intelligent brown eyes. "Your questions were good. You actually understood what I was trying to explain." We ended up talking until the venue closed, then continued at a nearby coffee shop. Emily worked as a database architect for a healthcare company. She had been raised by a single mother who emphasized education and self-reliance. "Mom worked 2 jobs so I could take coding classes," she explained. "She taught me that waiting for someone else to solve your problems means waiting forever." Something about Emily's independence and quiet confidence drew me in. We exchanged numbers, ostensibly to discuss professional collaboration, but soon were texting daily about everything from database structures to favorite hiking trails. Our relationship developed slowly, naturally. Neither of us was interested in rushing. We both carried our own forms of baggage. Mine from family, hers from a previous relationship that had ended poorly. We moved forward cautiously, building trust through consistency and honest communication. Meanwhile, my app began gaining traction. A tech blog featured it in a roundup of promising productivity tools, bringing a modest but steady stream of subscribers. I reinvested every dollar into improvements and simple marketing. The credit card debt slowly decreased as subscription revenue increased. 9 months after moving to Seattle, I landed a contract with a mid-sized tech company to customize the app for their international team. The contract paid enough to clear my remaining debt and build a small emergency fund. For the first time since college, I felt financially stable. Emily encouraged me to try therapy to address the family issues that still surfaced in moments of stress or insecurity. Initially resistant, I eventually found a therapist who helped me recognize patterns in my thinking that stemmed from years of emotional neglect. Your worth isn't determined by your parents' ability to see it, Dr. Levine told me during one breakthrough session. And their investment in your brother isn't a statement about your value. These sessions helped me establish healthier boundaries with my family. I reduced contact to occasional text messages and brief calls on holidays. Each interaction still left me drained, but the recovery time shortened as I built a stronger sense of self-worth independent of their approval. My 28th birthday passed without calls from either parent, though Marcus sent a generic happy B-Day bro text 3 days late. I spent the day hiking with Emily and friends from work, realizing I had built a support system that actually showed up for me. Family is who treats you like you matter, Emily said as we watched the sunset from our favorite trail. Sometimes, that's the people you're related to. Sometimes, it's the people you choose. By the time I turned 29, my app had grown enough to attract acquisition interest from larger companies. After careful negotiation and consulting with Emily, who had become my most trusted advisor, I accepted an offer that included both a substantial immediate payment and a continuing role in development. The night after signing the acquisition papers, Emily and I celebrated at her apartment, which had gradually become our shared space, though we maintained separate leases. Move in with me, I suggested impulsively, though the thought had been percolating for months. Officially, I mean, let's find a place together. Emily's smile was answer enough, but her words confirmed it. I thought you'd never ask. We found a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment with a view of Lake Union. For the first time, I furnished a place with quality items chosen deliberately, rather than whatever was cheapest or free. Emily and I developed routines and traditions, building the kind of supportive home environment I had never experienced growing up. As we settled into our life together, my parents receded further into the background. I sent Christmas gifts and birthday cards, made occasional calls that remained superficial, but otherwise focused on building the life and career I wanted. The constant ache of their disinterest faded to a dull throb that only occasionally flared into sharp pain. 2 years of minimal contact with my family had become our new normal. Occasional text exchanges, perfunctory holiday calls, and birthday cards maintained the thinnest veneer of connection. I had made peace with this arrangement, focusing instead on my growing career, relationship with Emily, and the friends who had become my chosen family in Seattle. Then came the call that shattered my carefully constructed equilibrium. My phone rang at 12:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Seeing my mother's name on the screen after midnight sent immediate adrenaline coursing through my veins. Mom, what's wrong? The sound of muffled sobbing came through the line before my mother managed to speak. Clark, I'm sorry to call so late. I didn't know what else to do. Are you okay? Is Dad hurt? We're going to lose the house. Her voice broke. Marcus's business. It's gone. Everything's gone. Over the next 30 minutes, the story emerged through her tears. Marcus had expanded too quickly, taking on massive inventory without secured orders. A promised contract with a major high school sports association had fallen through. He had been falsifying sales reports to my parents for months, while the business hemorrhaged money. "We're 3 months behind on the mortgage payments," my mother admitted. "The bank sent a foreclosure notice yesterday." "Where's Marcus now?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. "We don't know. He cleaned out his apartment last week. He's not answering calls." My father came on the line briefly, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "Your mother's upset. We'll figure something out." But beneath his forced confidence, I heard fear. Before ending the call, my mother said something that kept me awake for the rest of the night. "You always were the responsible one, Clark. We just never saw it." Emily found me at the kitchen table the next morning, surrounded by financial calculators and legal websites. "Your parents?" she asked gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. I nodded, explaining the situation. Emily listened without interruption, then sat beside me. "What are you thinking of doing?" "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to say this is the consequence of their choices. They dismissed my warnings, invested everything in Marcus, and left me to fend for myself. But that's not who you are," Emily said simply. She was right. Despite everything, I couldn't ignore their crisis. But neither could I simply write a check and enable the patterns that had caused this situation. "I need professional advice before I do anything," I decided. The next day, I consulted with a financial advisor specializing in family wealth management. "You're in a difficult position," she acknowledged after hearing the full story. "Your instinct to avoid simply giving money is sound. Without addressing the underlying patterns, you'd likely find yourself in this same situation repeatedly." With her guidance, I developed a plan that would allow me to help my parents without sacrificing my own financial security or enabling destructive behaviors. That weekend, I flew to Portland alone. Emily had offered to come, but we both recognized this was something I needed to handle myself. My childhood home looked neglected from the outside. The lawn needed mowing, the gutters were clogged with leaves, and the paint was peeling in several places. Inside was worse. Mail was piled on every surface, including unopened envelopes clearly marked with bank and collection agency logos. My father sat hunched at the kitchen table, looking older than his 56 years. "You didn't need to come all this way. We're handling it." I picked up a past due notice dated 3 months earlier. "Are you handling it by ignoring it?" "Because that's not working." His face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Don't talk to me like I'm one of your computers. I'm still your father." Then start acting like it. Adults face their problems. They don't hide bills and pretend everything's fine until they're facing foreclosure. The argument that followed was inevitable. Decades of unspoken resentments erupting into the open. I laid out every instance I could remember of being overlooked, undervalued, and dismissed in favor of Marcus. My father responded with defensive justifications until his anger gave way to something I'd never seen before. Defeat. "I pushed Marcus because I saw myself in him," he finally admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "I pushed because I wanted him to have the opportunities I missed. I never knew how to connect with you. Your interests, your talents, they were foreign to me." It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the damage done, but it was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. My mother entered the kitchen, eyes red from crying. "Clark's right, Thomas. We made mistakes, with both boys." She revealed that Marcus had also borrowed money from her sister and brother, nearly $60,000 total, with similar promises of returns that never materialized. "He was always so confident," she said, twisting a tissue in her hands. "We believed him because we wanted to believe." I spent the next 3 days sorting through their financial paperwork, creating a comprehensive picture of their situation. It was worse than they had admitted initially. Beyond the mortgage, they had credit card debt, a home equity line of credit, and my father had been forced to reduce his coaching hours due to stress-related high blood pressure, further reducing their income. We were counting on the business profits to fund our retirement, my father explained. There's almost nothing left in our accounts. I outlined a financial recovery plan, severe budget cuts, selling one of their cars, possibly taking in a tenant for the spare bedroom. I connected them with a mortgage assistance program for homeowners facing foreclosure and helped them apply for a modification. Throughout these discussions, I noticed subtle hints about my recent success, comments about the good money in computers these days, and questions about the app acquisition price. I can help you organize and plan, I said firmly. But I won't be providing direct financial assistance unless you agree to ongoing financial counseling. This situation can't happen again. My father started to object, but my mother placed a hand on his arm. Clark's right. We need to learn to manage what we have. As I was preparing to leave, Marcus made a brief appearance. He looked thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, and a nervous energy as he paced the living room. The market shifted unexpectedly, he explained, hands gesturing emphatically. Our suppliers raised prices without warning. The retail channel strategy was solid, but circumstances beyond anyone's control intervened. It was the same Marcus, spinning stories where he was never at fault. I watched my parents' expressions as he talked, recognizing their desire to believe him battling with their new awareness of reality. Before leaving, I established clear boundaries. I would help them develop financial literacy and navigate assistance programs, but would not bail them out financially without evidence of changed behavior. It was the hardest and healthiest decision I had ever made regarding my family. Life settled into a new pattern after the family crisis. I maintained weekly check-in calls with my parents, monitoring their progress with the mortgage modification and budget adherence. They were making genuine, if inconsistent, efforts to change decades of financial habits. Marcus remained peripherally involved, occasionally visiting our parents but making no concrete commitments to help with their situation. Meanwhile, my relationship with Emily deepened. After 3 years together, I was certain she was the person I wanted to build a life with. I planned a proposal during our favorite hike on Mount Rainier. Carrying the ring and my nervous energy up 4 miles of switchbacks until we reached the viewpoint where we had shared our first kiss. Emily said yes immediately, tears in her eyes as I fumbled through the speech I had rehearsed for weeks. We spent the evening calling friends and family with our news, ending with my parents. "Oh, Clark, this is wonderful news." My mother's enthusiasm seemed genuine. "We need to start planning right away. The Henderson venue books up 18 months in advance. And of course, you'll want a proper church ceremony." Before I could respond, she had launched into a detailed discussion of family wedding traditions, guest list requirements, and reception expectations. Emily raised an eyebrow as I put the phone on speaker, allowing her to hear the rapid-fire planning that had already started without our input. What followed was an unexpected and increasingly stressful immersion into wedding planning, not on our terms, but on my parents'. Despite living 3 hours away, my mother became a constant presence through daily calls, texts, and even unannounced visits to Seattle. "We thought we'd come up and look at venues this weekend," my mother announced on a Wednesday morning, 3 weeks after our engagement. "Your father has some connections with the catering industry from his coaching days." Emily and I had scheduled a preliminary meeting with a wedding planner that same weekend, planning to discuss our vision for a small, intimate ceremony. Instead, We found ourselves touring grand ballrooms and church sanctuaries with my parents leading the way. "This is where your cousin Bethany got married," my mother pointed out at a massive downtown hotel. "The Hendersons have always had proper weddings." Emily squeezed my hand, her smile growing tighter with each venue. During a rare moment alone, in a hotel bathroom, she whispered, "Clark, this isn't what we talked about. A 200-person wedding? A 7-tier cake? This isn't us." I promised to speak with my parents that evening. When I attempted to redirect the planning toward our preferences, my father waved away my concerns. "Son, weddings aren't for the couple, they're for the family. Your mother has waited years for this." "But it's our wedding," I insisted. "And we're offering to help with costs," my mother added, though no specific financial commitment had been discussed. Given their recent financial crisis, this seemed unlikely at best. The situation escalated when my mother created a Henderson family group chat titled Clark's Wedding Planning that notably excluded Emily. When Emily discovered this, she was understandably hurt. "Am I not part of the planning for my own wedding?" she asked, showing me the notifications from a group she couldn't access. The guest list became another battleground. My parents submitted a spreadsheet with 173 names, distant relatives I barely remembered, my father's former players, colleagues from both their workplaces, and various community members from Portland. "We haven't seen Aunt Margaret in 15 years, I pointed out during one tense phone call. "Why is she on the essential list?" "Family is family," my mother insisted. "Besides, she might remember how you spilled punch on her dress at Marcus's graduation party." Speaking of Marcus, he had suddenly reappeared with unexpected interest in the wedding, particularly in the role of best man, a position I had already promised to my college roommate and longtime friend, David. "Brothers are always best men," my father stated as if reciting an immutable law. "It's tradition." Emily's mother, Sandra, had remained respectfully in the background until my parents suggested a venue that would require guests to pay for their own accommodations, many of whom would be my parents' additions to the guest list. "The Martin family will be contributing financially to this wedding," Sandra stated firmly during a tense dinner. "We should be included in these discussions before commitments are made." My mother's expression could have curdled milk. "Well, traditionally, the bride's family handles the reception, while the groom's family manages the ceremony." "Mom," I interrupted, "Emily and I are paying for most of this ourselves. Both families can contribute if they wish, but the decisions are ultimately ours." The tension reached a breaking point when my mother organized a wedding dress shopping expedition that deliberately excluded Sandra. When Emily insisted her mother be included, my mother claimed it was an oversight while making thinly veiled comments about Sandra's divorce and subsequent remarriage, diluting her input in traditional wedding matters. Emily called me in tears from the bridal shop bathroom. "I can't do this for 6 more months, Clark. Your mother just asked if I was sure I wanted sleeveless with arms like mine." Then she showed the consultant pictures of the dress she wore at her wedding, suggesting they could recreate it in my size. Religious elements became another point of contention. Though neither Emily nor I regularly attended services, my parents insisted on traditional religious vows, scripture readings, and ceremonial elements. "We didn't raise you to have some quick secular ceremony," my mother said. "What would people think?" The vendors became yet another battleground. My parents had apparently given my contact information to multiple wedding professionals without permission, resulting in constant calls and emails from florists, photographers, and caterers I'd never contacted, all referencing conversations with my mother. 2 months into planning, our wedding had become unrecognizable from our original vision. The guest list had ballooned, the budget had tripled, and neither Emily nor I recognized the event being planned in our names. During what was supposed to be a relaxing Sunday morning, Emily sat down with me, her expression serious. "Clark, I love you. I want to marry you. but not like this. If we can't establish boundaries with your parents and reclaim our wedding, we need to postpone until we can." Her ultimatum wasn't a threat, but a reality check. We either stood up to my parents now or set a precedent for our entire married life. "You're right," I said, taking her hands. "This ends now." The rehearsal dinner was scheduled at Ravenna, an upscale Seattle restaurant with a private dining room. Emily and I had chosen it for its intimate atmosphere and excellent food. Despite our specific request for a small gathering limited to the wedding party and immediate family, my mother had somehow expanded the guest list to include various relatives who had traveled to Seattle a day early, specifically for this dinner. We arrived to find 30 people instead of the planned 16, with the restaurant scrambling to accommodate the unexpected guests. Emily's expression tightened as we entered, but she maintained a gracious smile. "Your mother called yesterday to update the reservation," the manager whispered apologetically. We did our best to accommodate on short notice. Marcus arrived 20 minutes late, already showing signs of having had several drinks. He had brought 2 friends no one recognized, introducing them as his business partners, though I knew his company had been defunct for nearly a year. As appetizers were being served, my father clinked his glass for attention. "While we're all here, I wanted to share some adjustments to tomorrow's ceremony. The minister and I have worked out a more traditional program that better reflects our family values." Emily's hand froze halfway to her water glass. "We had specifically chosen a non-denominational officiant and co-written our ceremony to reflect our relationship and values." "What adjustments?" I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "Nothing major," my father continued, though his expression suggested otherwise. "Just a few additional scripture readings, a traditional exchange of vows rather than those contemporary ones you wrote, and I'll be giving a special blessing before the pronouncement." My mother began distributing revised programs she had apparently printed that morning. As Emily received hers, I watched her face fall. The simple, elegant program we had designed had been replaced with an ornate booklet that prominently featured my parents and barely mentioned Emily's family at all. Her mother was listed merely as mother of the bride, while my parents had full biographies including community achievements. The final straw came when I overheard my mother speaking to her sister in what she thought was a private conversation near the restrooms. "Of course we're making changes. Can you imagine if we let them proceed with that modern ceremony they wanted?" And Emily's background. "Well, you know her father isn't even attending, and her mother's second husband will be there. We're adding some respectability to the proceedings." I found Emily in the corridor, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "I just heard your mother tell someone my family lacks respectability. Clark, I can't do this." We stepped into a small private dining room that wasn't being used. Emily's hands were shaking. "This isn't about different tastes or preferences anymore. They're deliberately erasing my family and insulting my background." Looking at Emily, brilliant, kind, supportive Emily who had stood by me through everything, something finally clicked into place. The pattern that had defined my entire life was threatening to engulf the most important relationship I had ever built. "Wait here," I said, kissing her forehead. "I'll be right back." I returned to the dinner, where Marcus was now loudly telling an inappropriate story about my college days that was mostly fabrication. I waited for a pause, then gently tapped my glass with a spoon. Could I have everyone's attention for a moment? The room quieted, all eyes turning toward me. I had never been comfortable as the center of attention, but for the first time, I didn't feel the familiar anxiety. I felt calm, centered, and absolutely certain about what needed to be said. "First, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I know many of you traveled some distance to be here." I took a deep breath. "There's something important that needs to be addressed before tomorrow." I looked directly at my parents. "Mom, Dad, I need to speak honestly about something that's been happening, not just during wedding planning, but throughout my life. My father shifted uncomfortably, while my mother's smile became fixed. Since I was a child, there has been a clear favorite in our family. Marcus received attention, investment, and support that was never extended to me. When I achieved academically, it was barely acknowledged. When I needed help with college, I was told to figure it out myself, while Marcus received extensive support. The room had become uncomfortably silent. Several relatives looked down at their plates, while others exchanged glances. When I warned you about the risks of mortgaging your house for Marcus's business, you dismissed my concerns despite my background in business analytics. You invested nearly $500,000 in his untested venture while declining to loan me $5,000 to develop an app that eventually became successful. Marcus started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. This isn't about attacking you, Marcus. This is about patterns that have shaped our family and are now threatening my future. Turning back to my parents, I continued. When the business failed exactly as I predicted, I still came to help you organize your finances and find assistance programs. I didn't say, "I told you so," though I had every right to. Instead, I tried to help while encouraging you to make healthier financial decisions. My mother's eyes had filled with tears, but I pressed on, knowing this might be the only chance to break the cycle. Now we come to my wedding. The first significant life achievement that you can't claim credit for or control. Instead of respecting our wishes, you've systematically overridden every decision Emily and I have made. You've expanded guest lists, changed venues, altered ceremonies, and worst of all, you've treated Emily and her family with condescension and disrespect. My father's face had reddened. Now wait just a minute. No, Dad. I've waited a lifetime of minutes. I'm finished waiting. My voice remained steady. Here's what's going to happen. Emily and I are getting married tomorrow exactly as we planned. The ceremony will use our original program and the vows we wrote. The guest list will remain as we decided. If you can't accept those terms, you don't need to attend. Gasps rippled through the room. My mother's hand flew to her chest. Clark, you can't mean that. I do mean it. For the first time in my life, I'm setting a boundary and expecting it to be respected. I love you both, but I won't allow patterns of favoritism and control to damage my relationship with Emily. Marcus pushed back his chair loudly. This is ridiculous. You've always been jealous of me. Now you're using your wedding to make everything about your childhood grievances. This isn't about jealousy, Marcus. This is about respect, something this family has never shown me. My father stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. If that's how you feel about your family, perhaps we should leave. That's your choice, I replied calmly. But I hope you'll consider whether maintaining control is worth missing your son's wedding. Emily had entered the room quietly and now stood beside me, taking my hand. We want you all to be part of our celebration, she added. But it needs to be a celebration that respects both of us and both our families. My mother was openly crying now. Several relatives looked uncomfortable, while others appeared thoughtful, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. To my surprise, Emily's mother stood up. As someone who has watched from the outside, I can confirm everything Clark has said. The disrespect shown to my daughter and our family throughout this process has been difficult to witness. But we're still here because we believe in Clark and Emily's relationship. My Uncle Robert, my father's brother, cleared his throat. Thomas, Diane, I think you need to listen to what your son is saying. I've noticed some of these patterns myself over the years. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. My father looked around at the faces watching him, perhaps realizing, for the first time, how others perceived his behavior. "We only wanted what was best," my mother said weakly. "No," I corrected gently. "You wanted what you thought was best based on your preferences and values, not mine. There's a difference." Before the situation could escalate further, Emily and I thanked everyone for coming and excused ourselves. We had said what needed to be said. The next move was theirs. As we left the restaurant, several relatives approached us individually, expressing support or sharing their own observations about family dynamics they had witnessed over the years but never addressed. "I always wondered why they treated you boys so differently," my Aunt Susan confided. "I just never felt it was my place to say anything." We returned to our apartment uncertain whether my parents would attend the wedding. I felt emotionally drained, but also lighter, as if I'd put down a burden I'd been carrying since childhood. "Are you okay?" Emily asked, as we sat on our balcony, looking out at the city lights. "I think I am," I replied, somewhat surprised to realize it was true. For the first time, I said what needed to be said without worrying about their approval. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll face it together." The morning of our wedding dawned with perfect Seattle weather, clear skies and mild temperatures, a rarity worth celebrating in itself. I stood by the window of our hotel suite, straightening my tie and wondering who would be sitting on the groom's side when the ceremony began. My phone buzzed with a text message from my father. "We will respect your wishes. See you at the ceremony." Simple, direct, and without the emotional manipulation that would have typically accompanied such a message. I showed Emily, who was getting her hair done in the adjoining room. "It's a start," she said cautiously. The ceremony proceeded exactly as we had planned. My parents arrived 20 minutes early and sat quietly in the front row. My mother had clearly been crying but had composed herself. Marcus was conspicuously absent, something I registered with a twinge of sadness but not surprise. We exchanged the vows we had written ourselves, promising partnership, respect, and growth rather than the traditional language my parents had preferred. When the officiant introduced us as a married couple, I caught my father dabbing at his eye with a handkerchief. At the reception, something unexpected happened during the father-daughter dance. As it concluded, my father approached me. "May I have this dance?" he asked, his voice gruff with emotion. We had never discussed a father-son dance, and such moments were not part of our planned program. Nonetheless, I accepted. As we moved awkwardly to the music, he spoke quietly. "I owe you an apology, Clark. Not just for the wedding interference, but for a lifetime of not seeing you. I don't expect to fix everything with one conversation, but I want you to know, I heard you last night. Really heard you. Maybe for the first time. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of everything that had transpired over the years, but it was more than I had ever expected to hear from him." Later, I observed my mother speaking with Emily in a corner of the reception hall. Emily's expression shifted from guarded to surprised, and finally, to cautiously hopeful. When she returned to my side, she explained that my mother had apologized for her behavior during planning and had asked for a chance to build a better relationship. "She actually said she wants to learn how to be a better mother-in-law," Emily said. "I'm not sure I believe it yet, but it seemed sincere." 3 weeks after returning from our honeymoon in New Zealand, we invited my parents to meet us at a neutral location, a restaurant halfway between Portland and Seattle. It was time to discuss moving forward. The conversation was difficult, with moments of defensiveness and old patterns threatening to resurface. But there was also something new. Genuine effort. Particularly from my father. "We've started attending financial counseling sessions," he shared. The counselor has helped us see how our attitude toward money was tied to deeper issues, including how we parented you boys differently. My mother added, "We're learning about boundaries. It's not easy at our age to recognize patterns you've lived with your whole life, but we're trying." I didn't offer immediate forgiveness or pretend that one conversation could heal decades of hurt. Instead, I acknowledged their efforts while maintaining the boundaries Emily and I had established. "I appreciate that you're working on these issues," I told them. "Moving forward, I need consistency, not just momentary changes when there's a crisis or special event." Over the following 6 months, small shifts occurred. My father called occasionally just to ask about my work, actually listening to my responses instead of finding ways to redirect the conversation to Marcus or himself. My mother made efforts with Emily, sending thoughtful messages and respecting our decisions without commentary. The most significant change came when they declined to bail out Marcus after he returned briefly, asking for money for yet another business venture. We told him we love him, but can't financially support his projects anymore, my father explained during a visit to Seattle. He didn't take it well. "That must have been hard," I acknowledged, recognizing the genuine difficulty they would have faced in setting that boundary. "It was," my father admitted. "But your mother and I have been talking a lot about how our need to see Marcus succeed prevented him from developing resilience. We enabled patterns that ultimately hurt him. This insight that their favoritism had damaged not only me but also Marcus seemed to be a turning point in their understanding. They were beginning to see how their parenting choices had affected both their children, albeit in different ways. My relationship with Marcus remained complicated. He largely avoided family gatherings after being denied financial support, occasionally sending terse updates from whatever city he was trying to rebuild in. I reached out periodically, offering emotional support without financial entanglement. Sometimes he responded, sometimes not. The door remained open, but I no longer felt responsible for walking through it repeatedly. 9 months after our wedding, Emily and I shared news with both families. We were expecting our first child. This announcement created opportunities for new connections and potential healing. My parents expressed joy without immediately trying to dictate names or parenting approaches. Emily's mother and stepfather offered support without overstepping. As Emily's pregnancy progressed, I reflected often on the lessons I wanted to carry forward into parenthood. I had experienced firsthand the damage caused by favoritism, by valuing one type of success over others, by withholding emotional support as a form of control. These were patterns I was determined not to replicate. Our child will be loved for who they are, not for who we wish they were, I promised Emily one night, as we discussed parenting philosophies. And they'll know their worth isn't measured by achievements or compliance. The journey with my parents continued, with progress and occasional backsliding. Some conversations still ended in frustrated silence. Old hurts sometimes resurfaced in new contexts, but the fundamental dynamic had shifted. I was no longer seeking their approval or validation. I could engage with them as an adult with clearly defined boundaries, capable of both compassion and self-protection. The hardest lesson, I told my therapist during a session focused on family reconciliation, has been learning that I can love my parents while also acknowledging the ways they failed me. Those things can coexist. As we prepared for our child's arrival, I came to see my family history not as something to escape, but as something to learn from. The patterns of favoritism, conditional approval, and financial irresponsibility had shaped me, but they didn't define me. I could acknowledge their influence while choosing different paths for my own family. In the end, standing up at our wedding had been about much more than a single event. It was about declaring that the patterns that had defined my childhood would not define my future. It was about creating space for a new kind of family based on mutual respect, honest communication, and unconditional support. Life isn't a fairy tale where difficult relationships are magically transformed by a single confrontation. Real healing is messy, inconsistent, and ongoing. But it begins with the courage to speak truth, to set boundaries, and to imagine something better than what came before. I look at Emily now, our future child, growing within her, and I know this journey, painful as parts of it have been, has been worth every difficult conversation and uncomfortable boundary. We are building something new together, something healthier than what either of us inherited. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson of all. Family patterns can be recognized, confronted, and ultimately transformed. Not easily, not quickly, but with persistence, self-awareness, and the courage to stand firm even when it feels easier to give in. Have you ever had to confront family patterns that were harming your relationships or happiness? What boundaries did you set? And how did your family respond? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of growth and healing. And if you know someone struggling with similar family dynamics, sharing this might help them find the courage to write their own new chapter. Thank you for listening to my story.